My name is Mark, and for the last 15 years, I thought I knew what it meant to be in a committed relationship. My wife, Anna, and I had a storybook marriage, or at least that's what I believed. We met in college, fell in love over shared dreams and late-night conversations, and built a life together that I thought was unshakable. Anna was always the ambitious one. From the day I met her, she had this spark, this relentless drive that drew people in. I was content with a steady job, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. We balanced each other, or so I thought. As the years went by, her career soared. She climbed the corporate ladder with an intensity that left little room for anything else. Meanwhile, I supported her from the sidelines, proud of her achievements, yet increasingly aware of the distance growing between us. At first, I didn't mind. I admired her dedication and was happy to be the anchor at home. But over time, the imbalance became more pronounced. Our conversations dwindled, and the intimacy that once defined our relationship began to fade. I convinced myself that it was just a phase, a necessary sacrifice for her success. My resilience was my greatest strength and my greatest flaw. I prided myself on staying calm and composed, even in the face of adversity. I believed that if I remained steadfast, any storm could be weathered. But looking back, I see now that my calmness was a double-edged sword. It masked the growing cracks in our relationship, allowed me to rationalize the little signs that something was wrong. It was a Wednesday evening, ordinary in every way. I sat in my study, surrounded by the comforting chaos of books and papers, yet a nagging feeling tugged at me. Anna had been distant lately, more so than usual. Her late nights at the office had become more frequent, and her excuses, once plausible, now seemed thin. I shook off the unease, attributing it to my overactive imagination. After all, Anna had always been dedicated to her work. But then there was the phone call. A colleague of hers called our home number, looking for her. It struck me as odd. Why call the house if she was supposed to be at the office? That was the first crack. My mind, always rational and controlled, couldn't dismiss the growing sense of unease. I started to pay more attention. The missed calls, the text messages she seemed eager to hide, the subtle changes in her demeanor. It all pointed to something I didn't want to acknowledge. As the days passed, my suspicion grew. I tried to confront Anna subtly, asking about her work, her colleagues. She brushed off my questions with a practiced ease that made me feel foolish for even doubting her. But I couldn't shake the feeling. It gnawed at me, keeping me up at night. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I needed to know the truth, even if it shattered the carefully constructed world I had built around us. I decided to hire a private detective. It felt drastic, like a betrayal of my own trust in her, but I had to know. The detective was purely professional, detached, and efficient. I provided him with the details, feeling a mixture of guilt and desperation. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. I went through the motions, pretending everything was normal, while inside I was a tempest of emotions. I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, that I would find nothing. But deep down, I knew the truth was already there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Little did I know, my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. It was late August when the pieces started to come together. The oppressive heat of the summer seemed to mirror the growing tension in our home. Anna's late nights at the office had become the norm, and the weekends that were once filled with shared activities and laughter were now spent mostly in solitude. I found myself alone more often, left to ponder the growing chasm between us. One evening, I noticed something unusual. Anna's phone, which she usually kept glued to her side, was left on the kitchen counter while she took a shower. The screen lit up with a series of messages, each notification causing a pang of dread in my chest. The name on the screen wasn't familiar, just a series of initials. I fought the urge to snoop, telling myself it was nothing, but the seed of suspicion had already been planted. As the days passed, my curiosity grew. Anna's behavior was increasingly erratic. She would disappear for hours without explanation, claiming she was meeting with clients or attending work events. But her stories didn't always add up. The detective I had hired provided updates sporadically, and with each report, my anxiety deepened. One particular Friday, I received a call from the detective. His tone was neutral, professional. He had gathered some information, enough to confirm my worst fears. Anna was indeed seeing someone else. Multiple people, in fact. Her boss, my best friend, and another man I didn't recognize. The revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. I felt a mix of betrayal, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I remember sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The detective described how Anna had been seen at various locations, often late at night, engaging in activities that left no room for doubt. The images he provided were grainy, but unmistakable. My wife was leading a double life. The next few days were a blur. I was consumed by a cold, detached fury. Every interaction with Anna felt like an act, a performance I was forced to participate in while knowing the truth. She continued to lie with such ease, it made my skin crawl. I found myself questioning every moment we had shared, every word she had said. How long had this been going on? What had I missed? One night, unable to sleep, I sat in my study and opened a bottle of bourbon. As the alcohol burned its way down my throat, I replayed the detective's words over and over in my mind. I had to see it for myself. I needed concrete proof. I retrieved the files the detective had sent and opened them on my laptop. What I saw shattered any remaining hope I had clung to. There, on the screen, was a video. A video of Anna with her boss, my best friend, and a man I didn't recognize. The image quality was poor, but their faces were clear. The betrayal was laid bare before me, undeniable and brutal. I felt a numbness settle over me, a protective barrier against the torrent of emotions threatening to break free. I watched the video once, twice, each time hoping it would somehow change, that I would wake up from this nightmare. But it didn't. The reality was stark and unforgiving. As the first light of dawn crept into the room, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be a passive victim in this story. I would take control, expose the truth, and ensure that those who had wronged me faced the consequences. With a grim determination, I began planning my next steps, the beginnings of a plan that would bring everything to light. The suspicions had been confirmed. Now, it was time to act. The days leading up to the unveiling felt like walking through a thick fog. I carried the weight of knowledge that was too heavy to bear, yet I couldn't bring myself to confront Anna directly. Instead, I immersed myself in the details of what needed to be done. I had to ensure that the truth came out in a way that left no room for denial. On a particularly cool September evening, I decided it was time. Anna was out at one of her so-called work dinners, and I was left alone in our house, surrounded by the ghosts of our past. I set up my laptop on the dining table, the very place where we had shared countless meals and conversations. It was ironic, I thought, that this space of connection would now become the stage for our disintegration. I logged into my social media accounts and began the process of uploading the video. Each platform required different steps, and I methodically worked through them, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was as if I were on autopilot, watching someone else's life fall apart. As the video files uploaded, I thought about the people who would see them. Anna's colleagues, our mutual friends, even family members would be exposed to the raw, unfiltered truth of her actions. I knew there would be backlash, but I didn't care. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the reality that had been hidden behind a facade of normalcy. With the videos uploaded, I wrote a brief message to accompany each post. I kept it simple and direct, just enough to provide context without revealing too much about my own pain. This is the truth of my wife's actions. I think everyone deserves to know. Hitting the post button was like a release, a cathartic act that drained me of the numbness I had been feeling. The initial numbness gave way to a torrent of emotions. Anger, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal washed over me, each wave more intense than the last. I wanted to scream, to break something, but instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen. The notifications started rolling in almost immediately. Comments, shares, messages from concerned friends, and shocked acquaintances. I couldn't bring myself to read them. I knew what they would say, expressions of disbelief, sympathy, and probably some condemnation for airing such private matters publicly. Hours passed, and the house remained eerily silent. It was late when Anna finally came home. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, the rustle of her coat being hung up. She called out to me, her voice tinged with the usual weariness. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling as I waited for the inevitable. She found me in the dining room, sitting in front of the laptop. Her eyes went to the screen, and I saw the moment she realized what had happened. Her face paled, and she took a step back, as if physically recoiling from the truth. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, and felt a mixture of rage and sorrow. "I did what I had to do, Anna. I exposed the truth." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her. This was her doing, her betrayal. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. The reality of our situation settled over us like a suffocating blanket. There was no going back now. The unveiling had been done, and we were left to deal with the fallout. The marriage we had built, the life we had shared, lay in ruins around us. And all I could think about was how I had ever let it come to this. The days following the unveiling were a blur of chaos and emotional turmoil. The video spread like wildfire across social media, igniting a firestorm of reactions. My phone was bombarded with calls and messages, each notification a painful reminder of the public spectacle our private life had become. Friends, family, and even distant acquaintances reached out, their voices filled with shock, pity, or thinly veiled curiosity. Anna stayed home, the walls of our house becoming her prison. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, her once vibrant energy replaced by a hollow shell. We barely spoke, each of us lost in our own pain and confusion. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken accusations and unresolved anger. One evening, as I sat on the couch nursing a glass of bourbon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Anna's boss standing there, his face ashen. He pushed past me without waiting for an invitation, his eyes searching for Anna. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. Anna appeared in the hallway, her expression one of weary resignation. "What do you want, Robert?" He glared at her, his hands clenched into fists. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That video has ruined me. My career, my reputation, everything." Anna flinched, but she didn't back down. "You think this is just about you? My life is in shambles too. We did this together, Robert." Their argument escalated, the volume rising with each exchanged accusation. I watched them, a strange detachment settling over me. This was their mess, a tangled web of deceit and betrayal that I was merely a spectator to now. Eventually, Robert stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Anna stood there, her shoulders slumped, tears streaming down her face. I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of what she had done. The fallout from the video was far-reaching. Anna's boss resigned in disgrace, and rumors swirled about the reasons for his sudden departure. My best friend, ex-best friend now, disappeared from our social circle, his betrayal too raw for me to even consider reconciliation. Then there was the man I didn't know, the third participant in the video. I learned from the detective that he was someone Anna had met through her past life, before we met. Her past as a prostitute, a secret she had kept hidden all these years, came to light. It added a new layer to her betrayal, a past she had never shared, a part of herself she had kept hidden from me. With the public exposure, Anna's past came rushing back to haunt her. The whispers, the judgmental looks, the veiled comments, it all took a toll. She became a pariah, and by association, I was dragged into the scandal as well. Our home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. Each room held memories of happier times, now tainted by the reality of our situation. I found myself avoiding places we had shared intimate moments, the kitchen where we cooked together, the living room where we spent countless evenings watching movies, even our bedroom, now a place of betrayal. In the midst of the chaos, I realized I couldn't continue like this. I needed to confront my emotions, to find a way to move forward. I reached out to a therapist, someone who could help me navigate the storm of emotions swirling inside me. The first few sessions were painful, dredging up memories and feelings I had tried to bury. But slowly, I began to make sense of the chaos. I started to see that while Anna's betrayal had shattered our marriage, it didn't have to define the rest of my life. As I began to heal, I noticed Anna was also trying to find her footing. She started attending therapy, facing her past and her actions head-on. It was a slow, painful process, but it was a start. The aftermath of the unveiling was brutal, but it was also a turning point. It forced us to confront the truth, to face the consequences of our actions. And in that crucible of pain and betrayal, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance for both of us to rebuild, separately but with a newfound understanding of ourselves and each other. As the initial shock of the unveiling began to settle, my anger transformed into something darker, more calculated. The public exposure of Anna's betrayal had been just the beginning. I needed to ensure that those who had conspired against me paid a steep price. It wasn't enough for them to lose their reputations. They had to feel the same depth of despair I had felt. I spent my nights devising a plan, fueled by a cold, methodical rage. I pored over the details of their lives, gathering information that could be weaponized. My first target was Robert, Anna's boss. His resignation had been swift, but I knew there was more I could do to dismantle his world. Through some digging, I discovered that his company had engaged in several dubious business practices. I compiled a dossier of evidence and sent it anonymously to regulatory agencies and investigative journalists. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Not only was Robert facing legal repercussions, but the company's stock plummeted, leaving him financially ruined. Next was Peter, the man I had once considered my best friend. I learned that he was involved in a real estate venture that hinged on public perception and trust. Armed with the knowledge from our years of friendship, I leaked information about his personal scandals and questionable dealings to potential investors and the media. The backlash was swift. Investors pulled out, and Peter found himself on the brink of bankruptcy. His public humiliation was complete, and he had nowhere to turn for support. The third man, Jason, the stranger from Anna's past, proved to be a more challenging target. He had no significant public persona to attack, but he had a family, a wife, and children who knew nothing of his sordid involvement. I gathered my evidence and sent an anonymous package to his home, ensuring his wife received it directly. The impact on his family life was immediate and brutal. The betrayal shattered their home, just as mine had been shattered. As I executed my plans, a part of me reveled in the power I wielded, the control I had seized back from the chaos that had consumed my life. But there was another part, a quieter, more reflective part, that began to question the morality of my actions. Was I becoming as monstrous as those who had wronged me? Each act of sabotage left me feeling both vindicated and hollow. Anna, too, was not spared. The details of her past, the life she had hidden from me, became a tool in my arsenal. I leaked the story to gossip blogs and forums, ensuring it spread far and wide. Her past as a prostitute, the secret she had kept, became public knowledge. The shame and judgment she faced were relentless. She retreated further into herself, becoming a shadow of the vibrant woman I had once loved. Yet, as the dust settled from my campaign of sabotage, I found no satisfaction in the wreckage I had created. My initial surge of vindictive pleasure gave way to a profound emptiness. The destruction of their lives had not healed my wounds. It had only deepened them. I realized that in my quest for revenge, I had lost a part of myself. One night, as I sat alone in the dim light of my study, the weight of my actions pressed down on me. The faces of those I had hurt, Robert, Peter, Jason, and even Anna, flashed before me. They were flawed, just as I was, and while their actions had been reprehensible, my response had been equally ruthless. It was in this moment of introspection that I understood something fundamental. Revenge had not brought me closure, nor had it restored what I had lost. It had only perpetuated a cycle of pain and destruction. If I was to find any peace, I needed to break free from this cycle, to seek healing rather than vengeance. The path forward would not be easy. It would require confronting my own demons, acknowledging my own flaws, and finding a way to forgive, not just Anna and the others, but myself as well. The sabotage had run its course, and now it was time to rebuild, to seek a different kind of justice, one that was rooted in understanding and, ultimately, in letting go. The relentless drive for revenge had taken its toll. With each act of sabotage, I felt my sanity slipping further away. The satisfaction I had anticipated was replaced by a growing sense of emptiness and despair. The nights were the worst, long, sleepless hours where my mind replayed every betrayal, every act of vengeance, in an endless loop. I was trapped in a prison of my own making. One evening, the weight of it all became too much. I had been sitting in my study, staring at the wall, when the floodgates finally opened. The numbness that had protected me from the full impact of my emotions vanished, replaced by a tidal wave of grief, anger, and regret. I broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably, my body shaking with the force of my emotions. The breakdown was both terrifying and cathartic. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully feel the pain I had been suppressing. Memories of happier times with Anna mingled with the stark reality of her betrayal. The faces of Robert, Peter, and Jason, now ruined by my actions, haunted me. I had become the very thing I despised, a destroyer of lives. In the depths of my despair, a thought began to take shape. Perhaps, in order to heal, I needed to confront not just the pain inflicted upon me, but also the pain I had caused. This realization was like a small beacon of light in the darkness, offering a glimmer of hope. I knew then that I couldn't continue down this path of self-destruction. I needed help. The next day, I reached out to a therapist. It was a difficult step, admitting that I couldn't handle this alone, but it was necessary. The first session was excruciating. I sat across from Dr. Carter, a kind-eyed woman who listened without judgment as I recounted my story. Speaking the words out loud made everything more real, but it also began to lift a burden from my shoulders. As the weeks passed, therapy became a lifeline. Dr. Carter helped me navigate the tangled mess of my emotions, encouraging me to explore the root causes of my pain and anger. Through our sessions, I began to understand the depth of my own trauma, not just from Anna's betrayal, but from years of neglecting my own needs and emotions. One breakthrough came during a particularly intense session. I had been talking about the night I posted the video, the moment I decided to expose Anna's infidelity to the world. Dr. Carter asked me a simple question. What did you hope to achieve? The question caught me off guard. I had thought it was about justice, about making them feel the pain I felt. But as I delved deeper, I realized it was more about regaining a sense of control. My world had been shattered, and in my desperation, I had sought to control the narrative, to rewrite my own story as one of power rather than victimhood. This insight was a turning point. It didn't absolve me of my actions, but it helped me understand them. It allowed me to see that, while my pain was valid, my response had been destructive. Forgiving myself became the next challenge, one that required immense courage and vulnerability. Meanwhile, Anna was on her own journey. I saw glimpses of her transformation through mutual friends and occasional encounters. She was attending therapy, facing her past, and trying to rebuild her life. Seeing her efforts sparked a mixture of emotions, resentment, sadness, but also a grudging respect. She was trying to make amends, just as I was. One evening, months after my breakdown, Anna and I met at a small cafe. It was the first time we had sat down together since the unveiling. The conversation was tentative, filled with awkward silences and halting attempts at civility. But it was also honest. We talked about our past, our mistakes, and our hopes for the future. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a start. Leaving the cafe that night, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The journey to healing was far from over, but I was on the right path. The breakthrough had come not from revenge, but from understanding, from facing my own darkness and choosing to step into the light. It was a small victory, but it was mine. With the darkness behind me, I began to search for the light. The aftermath of my breakdown had given me clarity, and I was determined to rebuild my life on my terms. The path to recovery wasn't a straight line. It was a winding road filled with setbacks and small victories, but I was ready to face it. One of the first steps was to reconnect with the world around me. I had isolated myself for so long that it felt strange to engage with people again. I started small, reaching out to old friends and colleagues, re-establishing connections that had frayed over the past year. These interactions were a reminder that life goes on, that there is a world beyond my personal tragedy. In the midst of this process, I met Claire. Our meeting was serendipitous, a chance encounter at a gallery opening. Claire was an artist, her work vibrant and full of life. She had a spark that drew me in, a zest for life that was infectious. Our conversations were easy, flowing effortlessly from one topic to another. There was an undeniable chemistry between us, something I hadn't felt in years. Our relationship progressed quickly. Claire was unlike anyone I had ever known. She was passionate, unpredictable, and fiercely independent. She had her own baggage, her own scars from past relationships, but she faced them with a raw honesty that I found refreshing. We were two damaged souls finding solace in each other's company. Our time together was tumultuous. Claire had a way of pushing me out of my comfort zone, challenging my perceptions, and forcing me to confront my fears. We argued often, but the intensity of our fights was matched by the intensity of our passion. Our relationship was a whirlwind of emotions, but it was also a catalyst for my growth. One night, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, Claire traced the scars on my chest with her fingers. "You've been through a lot," she said softly. I nodded, the memories of the past year flashing through my mind. "We both have." She looked at me, her eyes filled with understanding. "We're not defined by our pasts, Mark. We can choose to be something more." Her words resonated with me. For so long, I had let my past dictate my present. But with Claire, I began to see the possibilities of the future. We started to build something new together, a relationship founded on honesty and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. At the same time, I continued my therapy with Dr. Carter. Our sessions helped me navigate the complexities of my new relationship and the lingering effects of my past. I learned to set boundaries, to communicate my needs, and to embrace vulnerability. The process was challenging, but it was also liberating. As the months passed, I found myself in a better place. My career, which I had neglected, began to flourish again. I took on new projects, rediscovering my passion for my work. My social life expanded, and I surrounded myself with supportive friends who encouraged my growth. I even reconnected with my family, rebuilding bridges that had been burned during my darkest days. One afternoon, I received a message from Anna. She wanted to meet, to talk about everything that had happened. I was hesitant, but I agreed. We met at a park, a neutral ground where we could speak openly. Anna looked different. She seemed more at peace, more settled. We talked for hours, reminiscing about our past and discussing our journeys. There was no animosity, just a mutual understanding that we had both made mistakes and had both grown from them. We parted ways with a sense of closure, knowing that while our marriage had ended, our lives were moving forward. In the end, my new beginnings were not just about starting over, but about embracing change and finding strength in vulnerability. Claire and I continued to navigate our relationship, aware of our flaws but committed to growing together. I learned that healing is a continuous process, one that requires patience, forgiveness, and a willingness to move forward. Life was no longer defined by the betrayal and pain of the past. It was shaped by the choices I made every day, the connections I built, and the love I allowed myself to give and receive. This was my new beginning, a chance to create a life filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. As I navigated my new life with Claire, the concept of forgiveness loomed large. It wasn't just about forgiving Anna for her betrayal. It was about forgiving myself for the choices I had made in response. Forgiveness, I discovered, was intertwined with growth, each step forward requiring me to let go of something holding me back. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned golden and the air carried a hint of winter, I decided it was time to confront my past fully. I arranged to meet Anna again, this time with the explicit purpose of seeking closure. We chose a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes and familiar faces. Anna looked more composed than the last time we met. Therapy had done wonders for her, and I could see a newfound strength in her eyes. As we sat across from each other, the initial awkwardness faded, replaced by a mutual willingness to heal old wounds. "Mark, I'm truly sorry for everything," Anna began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to know that I've been working on myself, trying to understand why I did what I did. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. I've done a lot of reflecting too, Anna. I've realized that holding on to anger and resentment only hurts me. I want to forgive you, and I also need to forgive myself. We talked for hours, delving into the intricacies of our relationship, the mistakes we made, and the lessons we learned. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. By the end of our conversation, a weight had lifted from my shoulders. Forgiving Anna didn't mean excusing her actions. It meant freeing myself from the chains of bitterness. My journey of forgiveness didn't end with Anna. I had to turn inward, to the darkest parts of myself that had reveled in revenge. I had to acknowledge the pain I had caused others in my quest for retribution. Dr. Carter helped me navigate this process, guiding me through the labyrinth of my own psyche. One particularly poignant session involved writing letters. Letters to Anna, to Robert, to Peter, and to Jason. These letters weren't meant to be sent. They were a means of expressing my feelings, my regrets, and my forgiveness. Writing them was cathartic, a way to confront the emotions I had buried deep inside. In my letter to myself, I wrote about my journey from devastation to healing. I acknowledged my mistakes, my anger, and my pain. I forgave myself for the moments of weakness, for the times I had let darkness overshadow my true nature. It was a powerful exercise, one that brought tears and a profound sense of relief. Claire was my rock through this process. She understood the complexities of forgiveness and supported me unconditionally. Our relationship grew stronger as we navigated our individual scars together. We learned to communicate openly, to face our fears, and to support each other's growth. One evening, as we sat on the porch of her small countryside home, watching the sun set over the hills, Claire turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You know, Mark, forgiveness is a form of self-love. It's about acknowledging that we deserve peace, no matter what we've been through. Her words resonated deeply. For the first time, I truly understood that forgiveness was an act of reclaiming my own life, of choosing to live without the burden of the past. It was about growth, about becoming the person I wanted to be, unshackled by old grievances. As winter approached, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had found a balance between honoring my past and embracing my future. The lessons I learned through pain and healing had shaped me into a stronger, more compassionate person. I was no longer defined by betrayal, but by the choices I made to rise above it. In the end, forgiveness and growth were intertwined, each feeding the other in a cycle of healing. My journey was far from over, but I was on the right path. I had found peace in letting go, strength in vulnerability, and hope in the promise of new beginnings. And with Claire by my side, I looked forward to a future filled with love, resilience, and endless possibilities.